Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston. My guests today are both from BCG. Stefan Hoffmann is a partner and director based in Cologne, Germany. And Andreas Leitow is a partner and associate director based in Chicago. Our conversation is going to be focused on the importance of process excellence here in this age of AI. Gentlemen, welcome. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about yourselves before we get started? Stefan, you want to go first?
Yes, happy to. Thanks a lot for having us, Brett. I'm very excited to join your podcast. So actually, I have a history of 20 years plus in strategy consulting. I'm very much focused on operations, especially in the service and support operations area, which is everything beyond manufacturing. So I'm working with service industries across the board and also in service functions for other types of industries, very much focused on operating model transformation, end-to-end performance improvement, and that sort of topics. I'm doing that work across the globe. I have a strong footprint in Europe, but have also done work from Latin America to Asia. So I've seen a lot, especially with regards to end-to-end process performance improvement and that sort of topics. So very, very happy to share some of those insights and experience with you today.
Perfect. Andreas, how about you?
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Thanks for having us. We are very excited to be here today with you. Similar to Stefan, I'm really I'm focused on process optimization topics with a specific focus on support functions. So I have 14 years of experience helping organizations across the globe really on large-scale support functions transformations, often with really functional focus areas in finance and accounting, procurement, IT, but also HR. And the transformation that I'm often supporting have really a broad lens of what are the process optimization opportunities, what are the related org and op model changes that one has to think through, and what is really the role of AI, automation, and now Gen AI as well in this context.
Great. Well, it's fantastic to have both of you on. And it's really good to have a focus on process excellence. We haven't done that in a while. And, in today's environment, all people want to talk about is Gen AI. They want to talk about technology disruption for obvious reasons. But at the end of the day, technology innovation has got to translate into work reinvention. It's got to transform the way we do operations. So it's really good to have you on to talk about this. Stefan, let me start our conversation with you. We've been through many years of process reengineering, process standardization, Lean Six Sigma, even zero-based design, which kind of cropped up in the last several years. Your opinion that most companies are still lacking in this area?
I think it's a twofold answer to that question. I think, first of all, I can see maturity levels at my clients have really increased a lot. So they really master those methodologies. They have, let's say, well-educated people with a lot of experience in those areas. So there's a high level of maturity when it comes to the expertise and, let's say, the toolbox that companies have built up over time.
Mm-hmm.
The critical question from my perspective, and that is where I see still some gaps and some lacks, is what is the real impact that companies get from those, let's say, pockets of expertise, those teams. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done, actually. So I would say what I can see in terms of results doesn't really match the level of capability that most companies have achieved. And very often it's really driven rather by the setup and the mandate that those people and those teams have received, the standing and the power they have in the company, than about their expertise. So they can really do their best and still have low impact because the whole setup, the governance, etc., does not really allow to really create P&L impact from that and to do real changes in the organization and in the processes which are owned by other people in other functions. So I would say my impression is there are good preconditions to get this done and much more benefit from it. But it really requires a transformation in many cases of the setup, the governance, the way of working, the mandate as such, to really bring those buckets of expertise to bear.
Okay, and you mentioned the mandate to do this. Oftentimes processes do not really get the full attention of the C-level. They're typically seen as more of kind of an expert topic. From your vantage point, why do they matter? I mean, why is it so important for company leaders to rethink the way they operate?
I dare to say there's not a single performance metric for a company that does not directly or indirectly depend on the health of your processes. If you think about, for instance, revenue growth, I've seen many examples where companies really struggled with their, let's say, order to cash process. It just took too long. Customers went away in the middle of it because they were frustrated with the experience. So unless you get this fixed, for instance, as a process, you won't get to the full potential in revenue growth. I think we all know the examples, what impact it can have on your financial performance when it comes to cost efficiency, profit, etc. I think that's a no-brainer. But it also has profound impact on your employee satisfaction and, of course, on your customer experience. Mm-hmm. So if you take those four maybe as let's say the core pillars of a scorecard for company performance, there's not a single quadrant here that does not really depend on the excellence of your process. So that's why they matter. I think the story is very much often told from the wrong angle. So I can fully understand that people say, well, this is more of a niche topic, an expert topic, because it can get to the nitty-gritty very fast. If you do not have the right narrative in place and do not really start the conversation from the benefits and the outputs, the improvements that you can get to for your business. I think once you take this angle, it gets attention much more easily and much faster. Let's get back to this revenue example I had before. So I actually had a client really wondering why they had so low conversion on their sales pipeline. The sales pipeline as such was healthy, it was full. But the final step, the conversion, didn't really work out well. And that was exactly because they took too much time to get back to a client with an offer and at least a budgetary quote. So if you need for that 50 days or so, it's easy to understand that customers will walk away. And so starting the story from that end and say, look, we are losing on a very good pipeline, and that's really frustrating, and we need to change it. Then you get the board's attention immediately because they care about revenue for sure. Mm-hmm. So I think very, very often it's about the narrative, the story, and really making those dependencies transparent between, let's say, the key outputs and what needs to be changed internally.
Okay. And Stefan, just to follow up to that, for those companies that have bought into it, are you finding that they've moved past this era of just making kind of minor tweaks to processes, here and there? They're looking at it more holistically. Let's look at it end to end. That's really the only way to do it effectively in today's era. Is that what you find pretty much consistently?
Yeah. Of course, you will see differences across customers, but those who have taken it really seriously and were really bought into the topic, they really moved a lot of more levers than just doing some smaller redesigns or re-engineering bits in the process itself. They really fully reinvented the governance to really create end-to-end responsibilities, even in a functional organization. So they've really thought hard about how to make our people think end-to-end, act end-to-end in a siloed organization. And of course, you have to change that setup quite a bit to make it work and create the incentives to do it. Also, let's say, provide the tooling, etc., everything that's needed to make it work. And for companies who have addressed the issue from that broader frame with all those elements involved, I think they have really also got to the full benefits of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Stefan, can you illustrate the impact of good versus bad processes, maybe drawing on some of your recent client work? It would be great to hear just an example or two that could kind of bring this to life.
Yeah, of course. And we are thinking hard about processes and bad processes specifically all the time. And of course, I guess your audience will have hundreds of examples where they've seen or have been the victims of bad processes.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some commonalities in bad processes. And the very first one is, I think, also from the very traditional view from the lean perspective, is really not starting process design from a customer perspective. That is where, all the follow-on failures, errors, and bad experiences start. If you do not have that consequent focus on what would be the best version of the process from a customer perspective. The second one is, and of course everyone will tell you, but only a few people really understand it and act accordingly. And the second one that I've been thinking about a lot recently is, there is a lot of optimization happening for the happy path of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever has seen typical process mining graph of a process understands the happy path is only a very small fraction of the total process experience you can have. And I've seen examples where happy path was only 20% of all transactions, all orders, whatever happened in that process. 80% were non-happy path. Once you leave happy path and end up in the non-happy, chaos starts, and it's a nightmare. And I've seen that in the airline industry recently as a customer. It's really not taken into account, maybe because analytics are not sharp enough in that case, and you do not really understand the full complexity of it. So you think you have done a good job because you've optimized those 20%. Of the total, but you missed about all the other 80%, and that can really create very bad experiences, and it can include also bad use of AI tools. Everyone I think has experienced the chatbot that drives you crazy. It doesn't provide any meaningful answer to the problem you have. And there's no last resort like a human agent taking over finally. So there are many examples where exactly that happens and where that has not been really taken into consideration. And of course, I could talk for hours now about bad processes, right? The good ones, of course, on the other side, on the flip side, are those who consider those factors based on very strong diagnostics and understanding the full complexity first, and then really taking fully, let's say, customer-centric, so getting into customers' shoes, going through the full journey and understand all the complexity, the issues that can happen, and getting those resolved. Yeah, and I really must say, what impressed me very much with one of my clients was when we redesigned a lead to cash process, we really started with the voice of the customer. And first time ever, I saw an executive board standing in front of a wall where there were all those quotes from clients. And this board was really embarrassed about the experience that those clients talked about. You can imagine that was a really healthy starting point for the whole optimization journey. Yeah. So I think that's really important. And not only talk about customer centricity, really bring it to the redesign very practically.
Yeah, I love the customer centricity perspective. That makes so much sense. Even when you're looking at internal processes like accounting or invoicing or things like that, if you have that customer view, it changes the way you approach it completely. So I really do find that intriguing. Andreas, let's talk about some of the challenges to making improvements in process performance. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, maybe just building on the points that Stefan has already mentioned. I mean, and clearly, every process transformation journey is somewhat unique and different. But we often observe kind of the same 5 common challenges as it relates to a really process transformation. The first point is really around a lack of strategic alignment of the transformation at hand with key stakeholders across the enterprise. And we see industry leaders really defining an ambitious North Star process vision and gaining strong executive buy-in on this transformation vision. The second point, and Stefan touched on this one already briefly as well, the second one is really around focusing on incremental changes versus truly reimagining end-to-end processes. That is often really one of the main challenges that we see that are really holding companies back of achieving the full value potential. The third one is leading with technology to identify opportunities versus leveraging technology as enabler. It's a little bit like the hammer is looking for the nail, which helps in certain incremental process transformation opportunities. But if you would like to rethink a full end-to-end process, I think you really have to take this customer lens that Stefan mentioned, and you need to think about what is really what the best process outcome should look like, and then how can technology enable you to get there. We often see as well that there's a lack in mechanism to take out cost at the end of these process transformation journeys. And focusing really only on productivity gains is really only half of the equation. And if you don't address OpEx as part of these process transformation journeys, and without having this mechanism in place to take out cost at the end, it can actually happen that the cost for the organization increases instead of being optimized. And that can then as well really slow down any subsequent scaling of these projects. And then the last point is very important, yet really difficult to overcome. It's really slow organizational adoption. Really without clear organizational incentives guiding the employees to adopt new ways of working, we really see the overall effectiveness of these process transformation programs being just not meeting the expectations.
And I know that BCG, you have a best-in-class approach to process improvement. You've talked about some of the elements there that you use as your guardrails. What else would you say about just the way that you're working with customers to really help them make significant improvement where they've failed in the past? I mean, obviously, like we started on, there have been years and years of approaching processes with different techniques and methodologies, but you could talk just a little bit more about how you're helping companies think about this differently and really try to change the game.
I think it all starts with building a data-driven fact base of what the current state process and cost performance really looks like. And we often combine the more traditional value stream mapping exercises with process mining technologies as well to really understand what does the current process look like, what are the main pain points along the end-to-end value chain of the process, and how do we compare against our peers as well and cross-industry players that are top quartile performers in this area. I think the second step is really important as well. Companies really need to think about what is the North Star end-to-end process that we want to set as our ambition in an unconstrained view, and then really taking a customer or employee lens to redesign processes. For instance, when you're reimagining the talent acquisition journey as part of an HR transformation, it's really critical to think through it from the lens of the hiring manager that is trying to recruit someone, but also from the lens of the talent acquisition team that will be reviewing resumes, and eventually the candidate as well, or the employee, if it's really an internal candidate that is applying for a new position. So it's really important to just think basically through this customer and employee lens to optimize for this end-to-end process. We often see as well that an agile approach is really needed to accelerate the delivery and outcomes of the transformations. And it often really helps to put in place some quick win work elimination or quick win AI automation opportunities not just to help fund the journey, but also really to create excitement in the organization that something is changing, and some of the more mundane work that happens in Excel spreadsheets, it's going away, and then now we can use GenAI or other best-of-breed SaaS tools to help us in our day-to-day. That is really an important means of change management as well. And the last one is really, how do you enable and upskill the talent to use and adopt these new ways of working, but also how do you drive adoption and hold people accountable to really adopt these new ways of working?
Great. I hear both of you talking about technology playing a role in process improvement, and I'd really like to peel that back a little bit more. And so, Stefan, let me come back to you. What could you talk about the role of technology in process improvement, process reengineering? What does that look like today? What is the best practice approach from your vantage point?
Of course. So, of course, technology is a booster, is a very strong enabler across the whole optimization cycle for processes, and it starts with all the diagnostic work. As I said before, it's easy to underestimate the complexity of real processes, and I think a few years back, we really relied on quite anecdotal knowledge still. So experts who get to a brown paper session in the room and they would, provide their expertise, but it would only be a fraction of the whole reality. And with new technologies coming in like process mining a few years ago, that picture has completely changed, and we now understand the full complexities, and we're able to understand what are the relevant parts and journeys of a process, which are the less relevant ones. They also help, those technologies also help to bring data to the discussion, very granular data, that's super helpful to really set priorities and start in the areas of a process where it really matters the most in terms of the cost, the customer experience, or other metrics. So I think that has been a super important advancement that we have seen in all the analytics part. And then the role of technology has always been very strong, then also in the solutioning, of course, to create better processes and faster processes, more resilient processes. So I was quite impressed with one of my clients really some years ago who have managed to scale, for instance, RPA to an extent that I've never seen before, and they did it very smartly. And it was just the equivalent of thousands of FTEs that they gathered in form of bots in a bot farm, doing this job, around the clock, at much higher speeds, much less error, and no complaints to unions. Yeah, so it's really, in terms of a digital workforce, incredible, valuable as part of the solutioning. And then all the monitoring part comes on top. So real-time transparency on process flows, transaction flows. You have real-time information where errors happen. You can intervene immediately. You get notified, and create better experiences. And really stabilize also your operations with creating those, let's say, real-time process control towers. I remember times where it's not a joke. So I had a client in a field service organization, really huge organization, and they had to understand the order, the order status, or let's say the status of the whole work orders a day with calls. So they called each other to understand, okay, has it arrived now in your section of the process? But that was the only means to get a bit of transparency where things are. But compared, to those days, I think we have seen huge advancement. The same client today, he can really understand what is the downstream impact of decisions that I take upstreams now. Do I let this additional sales campaign in? What impact would it have on my service levels in the customer service? Because I know usually people will call in with a certain propensity. Do my service levels now allow for that extra wave to come in, or will my service levels collapse? And they can really decide based on that transparency, do we launch that campaign now, or do we pause it, let's say, for a few hours? So that is, I think, a really important advancement that we have seen based on technology. So real-time end-to-end visibility and really ability to take decisions with all the knowledge, what will be the implications downstreams.
So much more effective than
Yes.
the way we did it in the past, putting people in a conference room and using Post-it notes, and it was always controversial and tedious, and people didn't agree. And oh gosh, let technology lead the way and use a fact-based approach. Really a huge improvement for sure. What about Gen AI? What role do you see generative AI playing in process improvement these days?
Well, it's an important element, of course. And of course, the applications are well known. So everything that's related to document creation, document structuring, and summarization, and those sort of use cases are for many services processes, for instance, very important and very useful. So where I bring an example again from the sort of service organizations which have service technicians who used in the past to receive a work order that had, let's say, 20 or 30 pages of description, what needs to be done. And now they get a summarized page, very clean, very, let's say, conclusive in terms what to do next. So that has so much efficiency potential. It's really invaluable, I would say, to bring in those technologies. The trick is a bit to not to focus too much on a very specific use case only in a very long process, but to really try and extend the impact and the parameter where it's applied as much as possible to really get to the benefits that somehow match, let's say, the cost of the application. So part of our work is also stretching a bit the ambitions of our clients and to move them away from, okay, we have a number of single small use cases where we test and try. We try to stretch their thinking and say, look, it can have much more knock-on effects. And if you just increase the parameter, maybe change the model a bit and the outcomes you can expect to make it useful also for later stages in the process and get to more savings. I think that's a bit the trick and the challenge, not to be too narrow, to get to more meaningful insight, but of course also not to overload then the models with too many purposes and targets. So that's a fine balancing act, I would say, and that's a big part of our work with our clients today.
Okay. Andreas, how do organizations make sure their workforce is ready and equipped for the shift toward the new ways of working that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. And we often, as we think about AI transformations and AI process transformations specifically, we often refer to the 10-20-70. Really, the 10% of the value comes from the algorithms, 20% from the underlying data and technology, but 70% of the value really comes from people and process related change topics. So I think the question that you're asking is very critical. How do you get the 70% of the value right is essentially the question, right? And I think the first one is really the role of the leadership. Top management needs to be involved in such a transformation and need to communicate really the expectations, but also the narrative to motivate the team, drive culture, and drive the change. And we often see town halls, for instance, or leadership videos being used really for translating this message. The second one is around talent upskilling and reskilling. Companies need to create new training programs based on whether new roles are building, shaping, or using AI, for instance, for new ways of working. We often see companies adopting AI boot camps based on kind of the individual's role in the future in these new ways of working to upskill, reskill talent, because jobs are changing as part of the transformations at hand. The next point is really around talent performance management as well. Companies need to rethink how do they incentivize their talent to make sure these new ways of working are being adopted. What are the new talent metrics? What is their weighting? How do you evaluate talent accordingly? And then the last point is really around more strategic workforce planning. What are really now the implications on talent, skills, the number of talent as well that we need over the next 12, 24, 36 months, and what are the skills gaps that we experience. So it's really very broad thinking is required here to get the 70% right.
Yeah. Well, 70%, that's very profound, that 70% of it depends upon the actual people doing the work. That's pretty staggering. So let's talk about just the long-term vision for process excellence. From the BCG perspective, what does that look like, and what are the practical first steps that businesses can take to get started on that journey? Could you speak to that, Andreas?
I would say that our long-term vision for process excellence is really helping clients to drive efficiency, effectiveness, and experience benefits as part of process transformations. It is not just about cost savings, but it's also not just about productivity gains. It is not just about improving the customer experience. It is really how do you combine these 3 E's together to drive towards an full end-to-end process transformation program. So that is really, I would say, our vision and ambition as we're helping our clients on these type of programs. And then in terms of practical steps to get started, I think it all starts with a rapid process and cost diagnostic that we mentioned earlier as well, just to really understand what is our starting point and what is our transformation ambition, to set then really ambitious and bold targets against it as well. And then I think one recipe of success is really starting initially with some high impact and low disruption process improvement areas to help fund the journey, but also create excitement in the organization for change, while in parallel really investing in the broader infrastructure build-up. Are there new AI layers that we need to invest in to adopt Gen AI, for instance? What are some of the best-of-breed automation tools that we want to implement to help us automating and standardizing our processes? How do we need to upgrade our existing tech stack as well in this context? And I would say the important lessons learned here is don't just over-invest in all of these tech areas either. Really thoughtfully invest in an agile manner to really set the infrastructure in place for the next wave of changes that we are working on, to really make sure we take an ROI lens as well as we're investing in the technology. And then the last point is really, I think the ambition should be to get to sustained process improvement through end-to-end redesign that includes all of the points that we discussed about: simplifying the process steps, rationalizing redundancy, changing policies, changing SLAs, eliminating manual process steps, so that automation is definitely a key lever, but it's just one of the many levers as you think about end-to-end process optimization.
That's great. Stefan, anything that you would add to what Andreas has just spoken about with regard to process excellence and how you're coaching all of your clients in this space?
I think one element that is very often not looked at also as a metric for process performance is time. And as we are moving forward into even more digital around us, we get used to digital experiences like real-time experiences. I believe that process transformation needs to consider the factor of time much more. So if I look into my client base today, I would say 60-70% of processes still operated past time. And that means, you as a customer have taken a decision, have placed an order, whatever. And then the processing starts, and let's say days or weeks after that, you get to the output. And there is a bit of maybe real time and a very small bit of predictive today. I would say in future that those ratios will have to change a lot. So real time should become the standard, predictive should become a standard, and then this past time, where as a customer you have to wait for something, that should be the, let's say, the smallest part of it. Of course, it's more of a long-term vision, but I believe that especially for traditional industries, it's a super important factor to consider, because they are actually competing more and more with real-time operations of digital natives. And in order to compete effectively, they have to match that experience. And that means a lot of process optimization going forward, because also time is in the end determined by the quality of your processes, the level of automation, the failure rates, etc. So the amount of rework needed. So you have to be super fast, near real time, and first time right as much as possible to have, let's say, a good position in those future markets.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the podcast today to talk about this. It's such an important topic. You know, technology change, just the pace of it is so incredibly fast. It's requiring all organizations to do this well, to really embrace process excellence, not just get all consumed by the technology itself. So really good talking with both of you on this. I appreciate your thoughts and perspectives, and I wish you both the best.
Pleasure, Brett. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Have a good day.